Hey everyone, welcome to the Urban Outcast. I'm your host, the Outcast, Mark Urban. All right, so as I continue to interview interesting people throughout Whatcom County and Bellingham.
You were at the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah. The guy who I'm about to interview is already chirping in before I even get my introduction out. But that's what I like about him, because he's got lots to say. And he's got lots to say about a lot of things that are going on in Whatcom County right now. Because there definitely is a lot of things going on in Whatcom County right now. Some of them not so good. Some of them for the better. And Lyle's one of these guys that studies this, and he's kind of got his hooks into the local political pulse, community, and a bit of social media. And before I get going, a little bit about who I'm going to introduce here. He's a realtor. He's got a show on KGMI called Radio Real Estate, Saturday Morning Live, and also just started a new Facebook group or sort of a news bulletin called Public Safety Matters, which has just been very helpful with a lot of things about what's going on with the crime and keeping up on, the jail roster and that kind of thing and who's who and the criminal element of things. And, of course, some good things, that happen when there's missing people that are found, that kind of thing. So anyway, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Lyle Sorenson. Lyle.
Hey.
Welcome.
Thanks.
You are a busy guy. You got your hands in a lot of stuff.
A little bit.
Yeah?
A little bit.
So tell me a little bit about how did you get, you're a realtor. How long have you been doing that?
13 years.
And before that, you were a contractor, right?
Yep, for over 30.
30 years.
Tonka toys and dump trucks.
Right.
Digging holes and filling them in.
So you know a little bit about the building industry.
Yeah.
Been there, done that.
Been there, done that.
And now you've got a couple shows on KGMI, local radio station.
Yep. Saturday Morning Live, the first Saturday of every month on a rotating schedule. They took, when Chris Halterman was getting burned out from doing every week, they made a rotating host schedule. And so I wasn't in on that initially. When Jim McKinney moved to North Carolina, Dick Donahue, who sponsors the show, called me up and said, "Hey, you want to take Jim's spot?" And I'm like, "Sure." And Jim's a national intelligence guy. He was an intelligence officer in the military, super, super tuned in on, all that kind of crazy stuff. And that was kind of the
and then he gets replaced with you.
Jeez, I know it was a downgrade. I mean, like I say, kind of like you, they were scraping the bottom of the barrel.
That's why I do this on my own, is because nobody will have me.
And they called me.
That's why I'm called the Outcast, the Urban Outcast. I mean, it fit perfect.
Well, there you go.
And then you got company. Saturday morning or
that Saturday Morning Live,
the real estate radio,
real estate.
That's it.
I kind of co-hosted with Mike Kent for a number of years and did fill in with him. And then when Mike retired, they were looking for people to be involved with that. And so Rick Todd and myself and another agent took it over actually a year ago. So next weekend will be our 1-year anniversary of Radio Real Estate. We do that every Saturday morning at 10. And it's just Rick and I at this point. And, it's fun. We try to have a conversational format. You don't want to get too deep in the,
Yeah.
Nobody wants to listen to a real estate seminar every Saturday. So we try to keep it light and fun and informational at the same time.
But I imagine a lot of people are very interested to hear, what is the pulse with real estate in this, county. So that's an easy way to just listen in and is this a call-in show?
No,
it's not. Okay.
Both the shows, occasionally we will do call-in, but when you're doing a 60-minute format on air, most callers take way too much time.
Right. Lots of questions.
So, we'll let them call in, talk to the producer, leave their question with the producer. We get them on a sticky note, and then we work them into the conversation if we have time or if we want to.
Yeah, 60 minutes. That goes fast.
Well, that's like 34 to 37 minutes
of actual
airtime. And so, when you see these guys doing 3-hour shows, you're like, how do they do that? Well, it's really only like 90 minutes of airtime.
Right.
And it goes really fast. If you have a guest, if you have, content, if you've got a topic, and then you kind of do some other stuff, it goes by fast. I mean, when I do quite a few interviews on the show,
on the Saturday morning
live one particularly, but we do interviews on both shows, and I tell people it's just like everybody's always nervous, and I'm just like, don't worry about it. I'm not an ambush host. I will never ambush you. If you don't want to answer a question, you can shake your head at me and pivot.
Right.
I don't care. It's not my intention ever to make anyone uncomfortable or look bad or any of those kinds of things. And so, no, it's,
You're not CNN.
Well, it's just a good time. I tell people, when they're nervous, I'm like, well, let's go get a cup of coffee. And so, we'll meet a day or two ahead, and, they want question lists and all kinds of formal stuff. And I'm just like, we'll talk. And when we get done talking, I go, look, you're going to come and have coffee with me, except there's going to be some headphones and a microphone, and that's it. And a few people there who are listening in.
I just give my guests bourbon if they want it, and it seems to work. Sometimes I get out of them more than I want.
Yeah, probably. You don't need to worry about that with me. I'm a cheap date.
No, yeah. By the way, you're just ginger ale.
Fine.
Yeah. Not trying to imply anything there.
Oh no, I'm not at all either.
So I've got a lot of stuff. Basically, I kind of want to talk with you about a couple issues.
I was going to say, if you want to talk about me, that's a slow night.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that we can get into some college days and probably pretty fun, but we want to keep it somewhat PG.
It's more like summer camp with classes. Honestly,
one time at band camp.
Probably not even that far.
But I'd like to talk about the crime that's going on in Whatcom County, Bellingham, the homelessness, 22 North, which is a real hot topic right now, and of course, the biggest elephant in the room, and that's the jail situation. Okay. So, starting out, and none of these are really in order, but we have an issue, clearly, with rising crime and homelessness that, has been increasing, especially in the last 5 years, I would say, the last decade, really. But, I have my reasons for believing why it is, but why do you think that is?
Well, it's interesting because the topics that you want to talk about, you can't talk about one without the other.
Yeah,
they're all interwoven.
Absolutely.
They're all interconnected. They're all related to each other. And so if you have interest in one, it's going to take you into the others as well. It's just the way it works. And so, the crime thing, it's escalated. As a matter of fact, I was looking at the city of Bellingham has a couple really good dashboards that I like with crime stats that they update pretty regularly. I was looking at it the other day. In November, we had 23 auto thefts in the city of Bellingham.
Just in November.
And that was the highest month. It had been ranging lower. There was one month in the middle of the year that was like 18. But it was pretty consistently 12 or so. And a couple of years ago, it was insane. I mean, we had 300 and some for the year, and I didn't look at the annual total for this year. But I mean, you think about 300 cars. Pick a car lot in Bellingham. 300 cars is pretty much every car on that lot. Mm-hmm. Right? It's a lot of cars. In fact,
so what are you saying? Is that down or up then?
Right now, again, I didn't look at those numbers in preparation for this, but
seems like it's up.
It's probably down from where it was a couple years ago.
Okay.
I mean, it was really, really high. It was crazy. But all of these things are kind of, like I say, they interrelate. They're enmeshed with each other. A lot of the crime numbers that we see a lot of them are, how do I want to say this? Underreported.
All right. Why do you think that is?
Well, because nothing's going to happen, right? So a lot of times, back in the day when people thought, well, the police are going to come and take a report and they're going to catch this guy that's been going around our neighborhood breaking into everybody's car prowling or whatever those things are, and then they're going to go to jail. Well, the truth is you're not going to go to jail in Whatcom County. Misdemeanors and gross misdemeanors, you're not even going to get booked. Maybe if it's an assault with DV, you might get booked. But for the most part, you're not. Class C and Class B felonies are being booked and released. They're being refused for booking.
Which, and if I'm not mistaken, this ties into the issue with the jail overpopulation, correct?
Well, absolutely, it does. And these things are, again, everything's interrelated. It's intertwined. What deterrent do you have if you're someone who's engaging in criminal activity and you know that nothing's going to happen? Not only is nothing going to happen, most of the misdemeanors and gross misdemeanors that occur in the city of Bellingham, they get a ticket, right? They're cited and released
with a basically it says you got to show up to court,
right? It's just like getting a speeding ticket, right?
Which I listen. By the side note, I listen to the scanner, and one of the biggest things I hear nightly is FTAs, which stands for failure to appear. So, there's some of them that'll have 10 or 11.
Oh yeah, no, there are huge amounts. There are well over 2,000 outstanding warrants in the city of Bellingham Municipal Court. There are well over 2,000. Probably last time I checked, the county had 2,600 outstanding warrants.
Wow.
650 of those were for DUI at the county level. If you can imagine that, and I'm sure that people who, and a good number of those were actually failure to appear, I'm sure someone who gets a DUI and doesn't show up for courts, it's because they've totally reformed their ways and they quit, they quit drinking. And so, there's no
reason to go to court.
No reason to go to court.
Right. Well, all right. Fair enough. Good enough.
Yeah. No. And what happens? So what happens? The way these things all tie together is that when you have a reputation for no consequences, word gets around.
Oh,
and if you're living a transient lifestyle, and you hear that you can get free showers and free laundry and free medical care and free debugging and free dental care,
free drugs and Narcan if you overdose,
right? And enough to eat and good panhandling and free shopping days at the Fred Meyer.
It seemed to me that escalated was when they made that ridiculous law, that no pursuit law. That was a perfect example of where, and I heard it on the scanner. They knew. I saw an interview. They're saying, "Hey, we can just run." Because they're not going to chase us.
In some places, that's true. In Whatcom County, it makes no difference. And the reason it makes no difference whatsoever is that while it would be easier to chase them and catch them, once you catch them, you have nowhere to put them. And so
it's a catch-22, pardon the pun.
It's not even. It's a catch and release. In fact, between November 25th and November 29th, I do some infographics like the pedophiles and SEX crimes and
this we can find this right on
public safety matters.
Safety matters. Okay,
it's easy to spot, but for the catch and release feature, from the 25th to the 29th, just from the county jail, you have to go through the city of Bellingham activity log to get their cite and releases. And I didn't do that for that particular occasion. There were 11 catch and releases from the county jail, book and release or release on personal recognizance. Of those catch and releases, 10 out of the 11 were for Class B or Class C felonies. And some of the 10 individuals, and some of those individuals had multiple charges. The lowest charge was a gross misdemeanor. And, for people who aren't really familiar with that, the penalty for a gross because there's a trend. People like to call misdemeanors petty crimes. Oh, those are just petty crimes. Well, okay, a gross misdemeanor.
Well, certain people do, but yeah.
Well, people who may be homeless advocates or who are anti-incarcerational in their philosophies will tell you that those are petty crimes. They're minor crimes. They don't matter. But keep in mind that the penalty for a gross misdemeanor is up to a year in jail, in county jail, and up to $5,000 fine. A misdemeanor is up to 90 days and up to $1,000. And so,
if it's enforced and
well, if it's
able
enforced,
to be
so
implemented, but
if you talk to Ryan Anderson, who's the municipal prosecutor for the city of Bellingham, what he will tell you is that between 80 and 85% of people do not show up for their court date in municipal court. Bellingham Municipal Court, those are going to be misdemeanors and gross misdemeanors. Same thing, the county system, your district court is going to handle your misdemeanors and your gross misdemeanors. The Superior Court's going to handle your felonies. And so,
and this is county, it's citywide, countywide. It's not just an epidemic in city, it's county as well.
It's more prolific in the city than it is in the county. I couldn't tell you what the attendance numbers are for
That
county.
would make more logical sense to me just because of the density of population.
I have lunch with Eric Ritchie 3 or 4 times a year usually, and we kind of
he's the
county prosecutor.
County prosecutor. Who's the city guy?
Ryan Anderson.
That's Ryan Anderson. So okay, I'm gonna get those straight.
And so, he thinks, Eric, is like, yeah, I don't know why they have as much trouble as they do, but we get better results in district court. Maybe. I haven't looked at their numbers. One of the things that you're going to find, and one of the criticisms that I get with the Public Safety Matters page, is that we post arrests, but we don't post convictions and those kinds of things, because those records, even though they're public record, and even though judges are elected, those are very difficult records to access.
Really?
Yeah.
Convictions?
Yes.
Really?
Convictions, sentences, all of those kinds of things. You kind of have to have a case number, and then you have to do it on a case-by-case basis, like one at a time.
Where arrest is just kind of public knowledge.
There are public-facing dashboards, but there are no public-facing court records.
Because if I'm somebody who doesn't know a lot about this, but just hears this and goes, man, this doesn't really make me feel safe.
You shouldn't feel safe.
I mean, catch and release. I mean, guys that are FTAs up the yin yang, class B and C felons being released, and then of course not being able to easily access the convictions, which I'm going to guess that they're probably those that are not even been convicted yet is much lower than those, or much higher than those have been convicted. Would you? That's
yeah. Well,
guess.
I mean, part of what happens too with the case logs, like in the municipal court, for example, if you've got 17 cases on the docket and 2 show up, that means you've got 15. Now you've got 15 more cases to cycle back through. Ugh. And so your backlog increases. When you go through some of the county records that you can see, I've gone through the warrant spreadsheet and things. And, there are people who didn't show up for jury trials, right? Who have bench warrants that they had a jury trial and didn't show up for the jury trial. So you can imagine, you've got the attorneys there, you've got the judge, you've got everything scheduled for a jury trial. You have a jury there and the defendant didn't show up for court.
And we're paying for that with our tax
dollars.
dollars.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and it creates backlogs in the Superior Court system. It creates backlogs in the district court system. We're paying for public defenders. There's no accountability.
Well, I mean, look, when it comes to crime, we pay for it all the way around. Just it's only $900. So, we pay for it with higher insurance rates, because stores got to recoup that somehow, profit and loss.
I'm told that the Fred Meyer on Bakery has $1 million a month going out the front door unpaid.
Wow.
Stop and think about that.
That ties into, or you can tie that into probably the fact that there's a huge homeless camp right across the street, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. I've walked through that camp.
Tell us about that.
Well, I mean, how do I say this? Maybe I'm jaded. If you've seen one homeless camp, you've really seen them all. Mm. There are compounds in there that look like something out of MASH. There are some compounds in there that look like something out of Hash. I mean, it looks like a proving ground for Glacier's Edge. That's the house brand for camping gear at Fred Meyer.
Columbia.
No,
REI.
mostly Glacier's Edge.
Okay.
You know, I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot. I mean, and you know, when we talk about the homeless issue, I think it's really important to make it really clear. And I get characterized sometimes as being this horrible person who thinks all homeless people should be in jail and blah, 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 ad nauseum. The truth of the matter is this. I don't think most people have a problem with people because of their housing status. I don't. I think what
fair enough.
I think what most people have a problem with is bad neighbors.
That's a good point.
You know, I don't really care if my crummy neighbor lives in a $3 million house or drives a $1 million motorhome. You know, if he's having wild, obnoxious parties and having giant bonfires in the backyard and blowing stuff up and leaving trash all over the neighborhood and drug paraphernalia and is attracting drug deals and unsavory people and all those kinds of things.
Illicit sex with minors and, you know.
Well, or just you know,
debauchery of all kinds.
Getting it on in the yard. I don't care if they're legal or, you know.
Yeah, right.
Consenting adults or whatever. I mean, you know, without even going to the more extreme examples, you know, and to me, it doesn't matter if you're living in a $3 million home or if you're living in a, you know, $50,000, you know, $100,000 double wide, or if you're living in a, you know, $50 motorhome or a $75 tent or a
what kind of neighbor are you?
$10 tarp. Right.
What kind of neighbor are you? Yeah.
You know, I mean, I often wonder what would happen if there was actually a camp where the people kind of self-policed. You know, they cleaned up their stuff. They didn't steal, and people who stole, they ran them out to a different camp someplace else.
But that would take a different kind of cultural mindset and worldview. And would you agree that, I mean, it's my experience, because I've talked to some people who've dealt with the homeless, I mean, drugs are a huge part of this in a lot of cases. And that alters the mind and creates a lot of other issues.
Yeah, you know? If you talk to the local homeless advocates, what they will try to tell you is that most of these people are economic refugees. Okay. They were priced out of housing. They were, you know, whatever.
Aren't we all?
Well, right. Yeah. Well, and, you know, and the county council decided that they should raise everybody's property taxes, 2 weeks ago, and they couldn't wait till this last Tuesday to spend it. You know, they literally awarded $7.5 million to organizations that provide homeless services on Tuesday night.
$7.5 million. Cascadia Daily reported it was like $4 million.
That's just the portion that went to. They left out the other $3.5 million. That's the part that went to the Opportunity Council.
The $4 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're reporting that it was 600 and some thousand that actually.
No.
Well, I'm sorry. I correct that.
The headline
600 and some thousand went to 22 North.
Yeah,
is what they're saying.
Well, there was more, but anyway.
Okay, well, no, that's just good to talk about.
And the other thing that you're gonna find when you see these numbers, if you follow the council, what you're gonna know is that throughout the year there are going to be budget requests and budget amendments. So when they make these awards at the beginning of the year, that's just the beginning. I can tell you, you brought up 22 North. I can tell you that they have never been declined when they have asked for more money.
Yeah, I'd like to dig into that here in a minute. The thing that I'm seeing, and again, this is my purview, that, and you and I have had conversations before. I think that we agree 99.9% of the time on how to get somewhere, or the end result. We just have different ways on how to get there sometimes. My biggest thing is this, and I'm not sure we disagree. It's just the approach. I have a problem with leadership. And when you take a look at a cause, there's a causation. And you have to look at how did the homeless get to where it's at in the first place. And I'm tying this into what you just said about them approving all this money. The same kind of leadership that's in there right now is the same leadership that allowed the homeless crisis in the first place. Now they want to raise our taxes and tell us that they're going to spend that money and to trust them with that money to now fix the homeless problem that they created.
Well, the
Where am I
taxes
wrong?
weren't raised. The taxes weren't raised specifically for homeless services.
Well, of course not.
If you listen, if you read the budget, if you listen to the county executives' rhetoric about all that, the current budget and the maximum increase of 1% and using the banked capacity is just to maintain the status quo. So they're not making serious budget cuts, right? But that being said, you know, they could not wait to allocate those funds. And so, you know, it's what you see is what you see. You know, what's amazing to me, and I pointed this out on Tuesday night to the council, is that over the years that I've been sitting there, and it's been several years, and at pretty much every council meeting, and listening to these groups repeatedly come in and ask for money. And other groups come in and ask for money as well. You know, and not saying they're asking for money for bad causes, right? You know, and I'm not, also don't want to say that it's not good to spend some money for some of the homelessness things, issues, and for the people and those things. I'm not saying those things are bad. I'll tell you what I don't like. What I don't like is when there isn't accountability for providers,
Absolutely.
participants, and politicians. And I will support just about any homeless program as long as it's implemented with accountability, with measurable objectives and goals, and it's meeting the projected outcomes. But if it's not, then we need to move swiftly to make adjustments or to start over, right? We've got limited resources. We can't throw away money just because it makes our heart feel better. And a lot of times what you hear is that, well, we have to do something, and it's better to spend a whole bunch of money on something that's not working than to do nothing. And I would say that's completely wrong. You know, if what we're doing isn't producing positive results in the lives of the people that we're trying to help, then we're doing everybody a disservice. You know, I was in a board meeting yesterday, and there was a woman there who's in her 70s. She lives in a modest home in eastern Whatcom County. Yeah, you know, she's a widow. She was distraught yesterday. This is somebody I've known for years. And she was trying to figure out what she could sell and what she was going to have to quit doing activity-wise and things to be able to pay her property taxes. You know, and the rhetoric from Kaylee Galloway on the county council, you know, well, I just don't think people understand, because it's really, you know, only like $167 a year. You know, the county portion, even though it's going up 11.4%, on your overall tax bill, it's only 1 to 2.7, depending on where you're at in the county.
But you notice it never goes down?
No, it doesn't go down. And at some point, there's a breaking point, right? And so their rhetoric was, well, the people who came just thought it was because it was 11% of their entire tax bill. They certainly understood. And that's what the Cascadia article was about. That was all kind of the official talking points and rhetoric. Well, you guys you must obviously just don't understand. And it's like, no, they understand exactly what they're here asking. They're not here asking you for a handout. They're not here asking you for money. You know what they're asking for? For 2.5 hours in the chambers, 3 minutes at a time. And there were people in their 90s and their 80s who were in there asking the council, please don't raise our taxes, right? They weren't saying, we want $700,000 for a playground. They weren't saying we want money for services or whatever. They weren't saying any of those things. They were looking at the council and saying, please just let us keep our money. You know, what a contrast to, you know, the homeless industrial complex, where you've got all these NGOs and stuff in there saying, hey, you know, we need money. You know, I mean,
Well, that leads me though to my point again is why should we trust the same leadership that has failed till this point right now?
What's leadership?
Well, in my opinion, here's the elephant in the room. And, again, social policies or social issues drive policy, and policy is political. And whether it's Tacoma, Everett, Seattle, and now Bellingham, the one common denominator has been majority liberal run leadership and their policies that have gotten us to where we're at. So why would I trust them now to all of a sudden be able to fix the problem with whatever it is, 4.7
Well, you
million
didn't vote for him, so you wouldn't trust him anyway.
Well, but there's a reason for that. And I'm trying to ask the question to those who did as gently as possible that maybe they would agree that we agree, we don't like this. So why don't we try something different? But yet there's this thing in Bellingham where they just don't. It's highly partisan and it's highly ideological. And a lot of times I run into people that will talk about, we agree, we don't want our taxes raised. We don't want this or that, but they're a one issue voter. But because I stand for abortion, I just cannot vote for a Republican. So let me get this straight. You'll take higher property taxes, an increasing homeless situation, soft on crime policies. Oh, it's only $900. We won't prosecute. No money going to the jail where it should.
$750.
Yeah, okay.
Is the cutoff
Thank you.
between?
Okay, you'll tolerate all that because you want abortion or you want green energy. That's the disconnect that I find so frustrating. Is because, and that's why I don't like to say Republican or Democrat, because to me, there's liberal Republicans and there's conservative Democrats. I use conservative or liberal, and liberal policies are what has been driving Tacoma, Seattle, Bellingham, and it's going. So where's the disconnect? At what point do people go, yeah, maybe we should give the other side a try? Now, you have a very unique technique, which, by the way, I like, that I'm going to introduce here. You don't get into the political stuff as so much. You use data.
Right.
You use data. Look, I'm calling it out for what I see, but you use data. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, frankly, public safety is not a partisan issue. It's not left. It's not right. It's not conservative. It's not liberal.
I agree. I agree.
I think that it doesn't matter how many parks we have if it's not safe for our kids to go play there. It doesn't matter how much we spend on schools. It doesn't matter how much we spend on the Healthy Children's Initiative to have childcare and have early childhood education if the kids are going to get traumatized because we've abandoned our civic duty to maintain public order and safety. And, that's where we're at. I mean, that's, people ask, it's like, what motivates you? And, my family's been here for there's 7 generations of us. I've got kids and grandkids, and
were you guys Vikings? You kind of got the,
Viking and Native, and all my purebred Scandinavian friends say I'm a mess.
Yeah. Well, aren't we all?
But
I think you're absolutely right. I do agree with that. I mean, it's not a data. It's a data-driven thing.
It's not a partisan thing. And the reason I started the page, the reason that I've been advocating for the things that I've been advocating for is that I don't like the direction our community's gone.
Yeah.
I don't like the direction it's continuing to go. And unfortunately, I find that most people they're too busy. They're too busy to go talk to the council. They think it doesn't matter.
But they're not too busy to complain.
They're not too busy to complain. And the truth of the matter is that by the time they're energized enough to do something, they'll have waited too long. We'll be past We'll be past the tipping point, and we can't get back to where they really want to be. Our jail issues, we've had booking restrictions pretty much since the jail was built, honestly. If you tour our current downtown facility
it was underbuilt from the day one.
It was underbuilt from day one. And Dewey Drexler actually got it bigger than it was originally going to be. And it was still too small. So we've been playing catch up literally for since 1984.
Oh,
You know,
wow.
and you know, any of the service spaces inside that facility have pretty much been converted to bed space. So, you know, there's not room in there for programming. There's not room in there for medical. If we were to have a fire in the downtown facility, everybody dies. They've done smoke drills there. Everybody dies. Staff and detainees. Everybody dies.
Wow.
I toured the jail, both of our facilities actually, with a leading national expert on jails. And he's been in his career for 40 years. He's toured over 1,000 jails all over the United States in the last 30, 40 years, whatever it is. And he put our two facilities in the bottom 10% of anything he's ever toured, and that includes the Deep South 30 years ago.
Really?
100%. His comments to me were, I don't know how you guys haven't been shut down.
That's not very encouraging.
You know, it gets more interesting, though. About a month ago, the council went into executive session. So that means they go in the back room and you know, and the executive goes in. It's stuff that they don't, that's off the record, you know, and it's usually
like
got
jury deliberation.
It's got to do with, usually it's got to do with personnel issues or hiring things or whatever. And so they go into executive session. And so, you know, had nothing to do for 45 minutes except hang out. And so I approached Satpal Sidhu's PR guy, Jed Holmes, and engaged Jed in some conversation. I said, Jed, where are we at on the new jail? Because it's back in the executive's office. So it was with some local advisory committees and things, and it went back to the executive's office recently. And, you know, it's been over a year now, right? We approved the funding last November, the jail levy, to take 0.2%, to add 0.2% to the sales tax. So it's not a property tax, it's a sales tax. They started collecting that in April. And part of the thing with the jail thing, one of the things that if you look at the history of the levies and you look at the history of all the things to do with a new jail in Whatcom County, Sheriff Alpha worked on that for 25 years. You know, pretty much his entire career, he's like, hey, we need a new jail. You guys, we need a facility. This is going to get really bad. You know, we need to get on the front side of this, get ahead of it. You know, and got shut down a lot. And it's unfortunate because he was right. So I was talking with Jed and I said, man, it seems like this is going really slow. Where are we at? Oh, we're working on it. We're working on some permits and some environmental, ecological stuff, wetlands and things and stuff. And I said, you know, you guys run around behind the line of scrimmage a lot, but you don't move the ball very far.
That is a great analogy.
You know, I go, there's lots of motion. But, you know, you guys get sacked all the time. If anything, you're going backwards.
Yeah.
I said, if you guys were, you know, people say government moves glacially. And if the Whatcom County government was a glacier, the sun is melting the face of the glacier faster than it's going forward, right? So you've got a net zero progress. And, you know, I've watched this now for a good long time. So I asked Jed, I said, so I have a question for you that I think will define where you're at in the progress. He says, okay, what's your question? I said, how many beds are we going to have in the new jail? He looked at me. He was quiet. Oh, okay. So you haven't figured that out yet. I said, let me explain something to you. I have a civil construction background. You know, worked commercial construction for a long time, spent 15 years estimating. That's the first thing that you have to do to get plans, to get permits, all the things, is you have to know what size building you're going to build. What size building are you building? Oh, well, we don't know. Have you retained a consulting firm yet? No, we're going to do that ourselves. What could possibly go wrong? So here's my prediction, and I pray to God that I'm wrong. They're going to try to in-house the sizing. They have a deal with the small cities. They're kicking in their portion of of the sales tax to help jumpstart the new jail, with the understanding and the provision that there can never be booking restrictions again. So here's what I can tell you. I have yet to hear a number that's anywhere close to not having booking restrictions in year one. If we back up over the history of Whatcom County and a new facility, back in 2013, the county retained a consulting firm called DLR. DLR specializes in carceral facilities. That study, which I have, I got my hands on a physical copy of it and scanned it all onto PDF. The conclusion of that report was that we need 649 beds to meet the county's need carcerally.
Currently, right?
In 2013, they said Whatcom County needs 649 beds to meet the need through 2026. You know how many beds we functionally have right now?
It's like half of that, isn't it?
Yeah, like 325. If you look at the jail roster, they keep it pretty around 325. Well, it's no wonder we have severe booking restrictions. We don't have the capacity. Based on what I'm seeing, based on conversations with law enforcement and others, DLR was pretty darn close. I mean, like wickedly close.
I know what they're doing.
You know, conversations with Sheriff Elfo before he retired, when I kind of first started on this, I was like, Bill, how many, I came into this trying to figure out how we were going to get interim capacity, right? Because, what's walking, they're saying 4 more years till we have a new jail. And
4 more years till we have a new jail, or 4 more years till we have the funds to start a new jail?
No, 4 more years. They're trying to say they'll have it done in 4 years.
I'd bet $1,000 against that.
I probably wouldn't take that bet, because I don't think you're wrong. Depending who you talk to,
Right.
I've heard projections as far out as 9 years.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
That's probably more like it.
Imagine Whatcom County with the current levels of crime, with the current levels of book and release, with the current levels of everything, and no more capacity? It's insane. When I was talking with Sheriff Elfo before he retired and asking him, because I was working on interim solutions, which, by the way, there are interim solutions we could have.
I want to talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, we could have 650 beds in 12 months. But
can I ask a question, though? Let me back up. Wasn't there a few years back a jail initiative or something and that money kind of got, I'm a little foggy on it, but I remember something.
Back in, I think, 2004, we had a jail levy vote. The way that levy was presented is, I think that was 0.1% that they were going to do to put towards building a new jail.
What does that mean when you have a jail levy and 0.1%? Where does the other
That's an addition. That's an additional levy of sales tax.
Okay.
Right. So they raised the sales tax rate by 0.1%.
Okay.
So it's not, it's a fair amount, but it's not a lot.
No.
It's modest.
Sure.
And I remember voting for that. And I can remember filling out my ballot and reading the verbiage on that. And it was like, the way that it was written, I'm like, it was kind of build a jail, but it could also be used for operations and maintenance and whatever. And I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. But in the context of the campaign and in the context of the time, I was like, well, I guess right after they build the jail, then they'll use that money for operations and maintenance of that jail. Well, it was written very poorly, and I don't know if it was written poorly with intent or poorly through negligence, but what that did is it gave the county council and the executive at the time the ability to use those funds for operations and maintenance. So prior to that time, what had happened is that the operations for the jail came from the general fund. Okay. Well, now they've got this new sales tax revenue that they can use for operations. So the county put out a report. I think it's probably been 3 years now that report's been out, they kind of accounted for that money, and it ended up being, I think, $60 or $64 million that tax collected. Of that, by the county's own reporting, only $4 million of it went to anything remotely labeled new jail. 75% of that money went to operations.
And what does that mean? That can mean anything.
Right. You know, the work center and jail alternatives and this and that and that and this. And $6 million of it went to the city of Bellingham for reimbursement for something related to jail stuff. And anyway, long story short, they frittered away $60 million. Fast forward to the next two jail levies, you know, people didn't trust. So you've got anti-incarcerationists who don't want a bigger jail. And you've got fiscal...
We want to rehabilitate, not incarcerate.
And you've got... yeah, or not even, you know... And then you've got fiscal conservatives who are like, why in the world would we give you any more money?
Right.
Look what you did with it, right? So,
exactly.
So you've kind of got a situation where you've got the right and the left are back to back. They're almost in the same place. They're just back to back.
Right.
Right. We don't want a jail because, oh, that's mean. And we don't want a jail because we don't trust you people to do what you say you're going to do.
Interesting.
Right. So you've got two very different motivations for no votes. What's interesting is when you talk to county officials, I've talked to some past county officials and some present county officials, and what they say is, well, the people didn't want a jail. And so what they say is those no votes on those two levies before, but in the intervening years, from the one we passed, there was two in between, and then this third one, the people passed. Said, all right, we're going to give you a chance. The county officials, what they like to say, and kind of the way they think, is that those no votes on those levies absolved them for the responsibility for providing adequate capacity to maintain public law and order. So, which is completely a false narrative, because the question on those votes wasn't, should we build a new jail? The question on the votes was, should we raise the sales tax to levy funds for a new jail? So people saying we don't want to give you more money doesn't absolve the government from the responsibility.
It's very misleading.
It doesn't absolve the government from their responsibility to provide the capacity to maintain public order and public safety. But they take it as that. They look at it and say, well, look, the people did, you know, and I was talking with a past...
All of a sudden, they really care what the people think.
When I toured the Bakerview encampment, one of the former county council members owns a piece of property there. I think he's one of 5 owners or 6 owners there. And so he was there, and I don't know why I always end up engaging people in conversations, or they engage me, and we end up on these topics. And the levy topic came up, and he's like, oh no, they didn't want it. You should have heard the testimony in the chamber. I said, but that's not what the question was on the ballot. It wasn't, shall we build a new jail? It was, shall we raise the sales tax to raise money to build a new jail? Now, some of those people may have voted against it because they didn't want it, but I can tell you there was probably an equal number who voted against it because they don't trust you, because you aren't accountable, right? But they interpret it that way. And one of the things I want to say with that is that it's extremely important for people to come out and testify at public comment.
Yeah, this is something I want my audience to hear.
Because that really demonstrated, you know, we're hearing from, if I said this council person's name, everybody would instantly recognize it, very prominent local citizen. But his interpretation, because they had anti-incarcerationists, people who think jail is mean, coming and testifying regularly before the council during that time, then their interpretation when it doesn't pass isn't that we don't trust you guys because you're unaccountable. It's his impression is, well, no, the people didn't want a jail. That's why it didn't pass, because those are the only people who actually took the time to come in and talk.
So you really think that you believe that people showing up does actually make an effect.
It does.
So what do you say to the people though that believe that, you know, there's a certain segment that leans one way, a certain segment leans other, and the segment that leans one way is bigger. Therefore, what I say isn't going to matter.
They still hear it. And what I'm going to say is that I look at that public comment. I know that some of the council members see it as an annoyance. They see it as a burden. They see it as a waste of time. I think that that's a sacred duty. That's a sacred honor that they have, that literally people are taking,
For
hours.
granted.
They're taking hours out of their life for the opportunity to have 3 minutes to look their elected leaders in the eye and tell them their story and tell them their concerns.
Well, and that's the message I want to get out to my audience, because I'm just as guilty. I'm busy. They're boring often. Although I do learn a lot, but
you have to stay awake.
yeah, you might want to do a little caffeine. But the point that Lyle's trying to make is that, guys, we don't have the luxury anymore of complaining when we're not showing up with pitchforks and torches, metaphorically, to these council meetings and letting these guys know that, hey, this is not okay. And we have to start going. You have to start carving out. What are the council meetings? They're every other week?
Yeah, generally every 2 weeks. Now the next one's going to be January 13th.
Okay. And where can you go, number one, to find out when they are and what the topic is?
Just Google Whatcom County Council meetings, and then it'll take you to the county website, and you can click on links to get the agenda, all the things.
Yeah, if you're a family, your husband and a wife, you got kids, maybe the wife can watch the kids while the husband goes, or vice versa. Maybe take turns. But guys,
Bring the kids.
Lyle's, well, careful what
take the kids.
Depends on the age, but yeah. I mean, do what you got to do, but guys, we have to start showing up. And look, I'm the first guy to say.
The other side shows up en masse.
Well, that's the problem, and I think that, the fact that even though it's a county chamber, it's in the city. So you got all these city folk that come in.
Well, you get a lot of kids from the university, so I don't know if they get class credit.
You get a lot of activists.
I think they get class credit sometimes for coming in.
Sure.
Councilmember Donovan is a professor at Western.
How many people knew that 2 council meetings ago, they raised your property taxes? I bet most of my audience is going to go, they did what? I didn't realize that. I'm ashamed to know. Now, I rent. I don't own right now, but that affects my rent.
Your rent will go up.
It
gets passed on.
Everything.
You can't absorb.
Yeah.
In my role in real estate, as a residential broker, as a commercial broker, as a leasing broker, those things all get factored in the rents, right? It's interesting in Bellingham, and when they're allowing public comment, I typically go to the Bellingham City Council meetings as well. And, you hear all of the people who want rent control, and, they've got an 8% cap on landlords on how much you can raise your rent in a year. Well, what the unintended consequence of something like that is, if you've got a cap and you don't have banked capacity like the city, like government does, to be able to draw on the raises that you didn't use in the past, then you pretty much, the only thing you can do is raise it 8% every year, period. Right?
Mm.
Like in commercial leases, it's pretty common to have like a 3% annual escalation.
Mm.
Also, though, in commercial leases, most of the time, they're triple. If they're a multi-year lease, they're what's called triple net. So the triple net is your taxes, your insurance, and your common area maintenance. And so that functions separately from your base rent, right? So your base rent will have a 3% escalation clause. Those other things are a direct reflection of the actual cost if that makes any sense. It does. If in a gross lease that included all of those things, which most residential leases are, you're going to have that increase on all of those things that are factored into your rent every year, whether it goes up or not, because while things may not go up this year, they might go up 12% next year, right? See how that is?
Well, we definitely
it
have,
affects everybody.
We have some intersecting problems for sure. And I think, again, for me, I think that one, like I said, I'm calling out leadership, but, you're saying that you can call out leadership all you want, but if you don't show up to the meetings,
if the leadership doesn't know who you are and they don't recognize you and know you by name, you're not involved enough.
Wow. Did you hear that, folks? That's pretty intense. Yeah. And that's the thing is, unless you're planning on just moving out of here and getting packing up and giving up, guys, we have to, if I get it, you're working, you got kids, maybe you can find a babysitter, even go to one of them a month, but, show your face.
The only way that you can know that you're heard is to stand in that chamber and look them in the eye.
That's powerful.
That's the only way you can guarantee that they had an opportunity to hear you, because an email, come on.
Yeah, well,
you know what? If you've got any kind of anything going on, you probably get 100 emails a day. And if you're on the county council, there's days you probably get 1,000 emails.
Right.
So, it would be delusional to think they're going to see your email. Right. And then a lot of the emails that they get are form emails. And so an organization will put out a letter and people put their name at the bottom and send it from their email, right? And so when those things are going on, those discourage council members looking at emails all the more, right? Because the last thing they want to do is open 500 emails that all say the same thing with a different name at the bottom, right? So there's a hint. If you're an activist or if you have a cause you care about, don't send form emails and just have a whole bunch of people send it.
Yeah, I get those all the time from the NRA and stuff, and I just kind of go, this ain't gonna do any good. So let's transition into one of the other correlating issues that's a big hot topic right now in Bellingham, and that is 22 North. If you wouldn't mind, in your best of your knowledge terms, explain to the audience what exactly is 22 North. What is it for, and who runs it?
So 22 North is a facility that's known as permanent supportive housing. So if you haven't been around the homelessness and all the issues with that, you may not be familiar with that term, or you may have seen it referred to as PSH. They use a concept for placement and screening for those facilities. It's a doctrine called housing first. My definition of housing first is that a roof is a magical talisman that once you're under it, it makes all your problems better, right? And so what the doctrine says is that having somebody stabilized under the roof is the first step towards moving them towards help, right, and towards wholeness. And in theory and concept, that's not too bad.
Sure.
That's okay, I could see that, right? If it's done with accountability, it's a powerful tool. If it's done without accountability, it becomes an indoor encampment. As a matter of fact, in a thread today, I called it permanent supportive warehousing, right? If your measure of success is just getting someone off the street and under a roof, but not having any other aspect of their life change or improve or behaviors, then it's just permanent supportive warehousing.
So let me get this straight.
You're getting them off the street, kind of, but they can still leave and go out in the street in the daytime and nighttime and engage in all the activities that they were before. But instead of going home to their tent, they can go home to their apartment.
Well, what is the accountability program that's implemented for this, or allegedly?
Well, they get paid a lot of money for case management, but
is there any rehab or meetings?
They're not required to do anything in those facilities.
So we're paying for housing people that have a whole lot of issues, whether it's mentally, drug related, criminal, or whatever. Would that be correct?
Yeah.
That therefore, in return, have no programs or accountability that they're required to attend.
Yeah, Housing First basically says that it's a no strings attached kind of entry. It's low barrier at its finest, really. So yeah, I mean,
and now
you can take the man out of the camp, but it's really hard to take the camp out of the man,
right,
unless there are milestones and incentives and goals and and besides that, who's going to take a carrot if there's no stick? If there's a carrot, carrots don't look very good if you can have whatever else you want, right? Why am I going to take a carrot? It's crunchy. It tastes all right, but it's not great. But I can go over there and I can go for free shopping hours and get whatever I want. I can go to my favorite alley and get all the hookups and all the substances that I've always had, and then I can go back to my roof and smoke them.
So let's walk through this. I'm a person that, let's say, I've had some challenges. I've had some criminal issues. Maybe I'm not too sharp. I've had some drug issues. How do I qualify to be in this program?
Are these confessions?
Well, since we're not, but I don't know. I hope not. I hope not.
I hope not too.
Yeah. But how do I qualify to get in this program? What qualifies me to live for free?
There are criteria. I don't have those with me today, but there are lists of criteria, and they've got checklists and they have things. Some of those are sometimes there's federal funding attached to those, and people have to meet certain criteria. The interesting thing that people don't realize, and it's really part of the problem. One of the things in commercial real estate and leasing and building stabilization and thing is tenant placement and tenant mix. In other words, you don't put a rock studio right next door to a yoga studio, right? You don't put a machine shop next to a therapeutic massage place, because those uses they're
not conducive.
They're not conducive, right? Those things just don't work next to each other.
One of these things is not like the other. Brings back to Sesame Street.
Maybe
that's what we need to do.
Everything I needed to know, I learned in kindergarten. But But no, that is, and so that's a problem. One of the things, because of the page, because of the radio shows, because of whatever, I get people who come to me all the time and talk to me about all sorts of things. And I've had building managers come to me and go, yeah, here's what happens. They go, these girls, have a kid or whatever, which puts them in priority for housing. And so they come, they've got their set of problems, and then they bring their dealer boyfriend, comes and moves in. The next thing you know, we've got drug trafficking, and these aren't in permanent supportive housing. These are a lot of times Section 8 vouchers, those kinds of things. And so they're actually mixing people in active addiction, who are transitioning from homelessness in with other people who may be low income, who may be, maybe on vouchers, maybe not on vouchers. Maybe they're working and trying to, make it go on their own. Maybe, maybe they're in recovery, right? And you're just placing people in active addiction in the middle of all these other vulnerable people, maybe with little kids or whatever. And so it's really bad tenant mix, right? I've had building owners come to me and go, yeah, we took some vouchers from OPCO, Opportunity Council. They do a lot of the screening and placement because they've got the hot teams, and a lot of the homeless service center and all these things all these programs run through the Opportunity Council. And so they've kind of become the de facto social services arm of the city and the county, kind of this too big to fail kind of thing. And so whoever's in charge of those decisions of placement and screening is making really bad decisions. And the net result of that, actually, and it's interesting, I've talked to their director, Greg Winters, and I've talked to their CFO about some of these issues, and it's like, look, the net result of you guys implementing poor policy, even though it makes your heart feel good because you're getting somebody out of the woods and under a roof, so that should make all their problems better. The net result of it is because you're placing people in active addiction and they're not following the rules. I mean, if you rent, most places you rent, you can't smoke anything, right? Can't smoke tobacco, you can't smoke weed, can't smoke cigars, certainly can't smoke fentanyl or meth. And usually not within 25 feet of the building. Well, I get a lot of these people who come to me and say, yeah, we had to remediate. Once we got the people out, we had to remediate our units. They were contaminated with meth and fentanyl.
Wow.
Right? So, one of the building owners I was talking to, they had 6 or 8 units that they had to remediate. And it was a pretty new facility, right? And they're like, yeah, we're not taking any more of those. Interfaith, who is a group of churches that kind of went together in a nonprofit in 2023, I think they had 24 units. A third of their units were contaminated and had to be remediated.
It's interesting you say that because I'm going to be interviewing somebody who used to work with them, who was a manager.
With
position,
OPCO?
With OPCO, who actually asked me to do a bid. And she told me, but yeah, they got to repaint. Every time somebody moves out, yeah, you're going to want to probably suit up when you go in there to do the painting and everything.
You got to do more than paint, though. You can't just encapsulate with paint.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I
didn't get it. I didn't get it.
It costs like 15 to 20 grand a unit, depending on how bad it is. But it generally costs 15 to 20 grand a unit. One of the providers I was talking to said they have to replace the appliances and everything. So as a net result, though, of this poor placement and screening, Interfaith got out of housing. So all of their units pretty much went away. I saw an article recently. It sounds like OPCO got 4 or 6 units of their units in Bellingham, and they're being probably owned and operated by OPCO now. But, the net result of poor screening and poor placement and bad policy that doesn't end up helping the person they're trying to help, because obviously if they're contaminating their place, then, they're not making forward progress. One of the things that's really hard to get, talk about court data hard to get. What's really hard to get is data from permanent supportive housing and other organizations who work with the homeless. It's very hard to get data.
Why is that, do you think?
Because there's no really good news to track.
Oh, really? So you think they just don't want you to find out?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, if if you're running a program and you're having fabulous results,
you want everyone to know.
You're going to shout it from the mountaintops. You're going to tell everybody. But, if you're not making progress and things are bad, you're not going to you're going to do everything you can to avoid reporting any significant data. And what I tell people all the time, and I've read a ton of reports from, because I've done a lot of research on this stuff. I tend to be a little bit of a geek, of an info geek about a lot of this stuff, because I like to know about it, right? I want to know what's going on. I want to understand the concepts. I want to understand the applications. If, I don't wish failure on anybody.
Of course not.
I wish Opportunity Council had the best permanent supportive and rehabilitation programs in the world, frankly. I would say that Lydia Place, who also subscribes to Housing First and stuff, has much better outcomes. They don't have nearly as many problems.
Why do you think that is?
They have structure and they have programs and they have
accountability
and levels of accountability. And it makes all the difference in the world. People will rise to whatever expectation you set for them.
Absolutely.
They'll probably fall short, but if they fall short of a lofty goal, they're a lot farther than they would have been falling short of low expectations or no expectations. And so
what's that? The soft bigotry of low expectations that gets perpetrated so commonly on the lower income of society.
Well, and we do it in so many ways.
Right.
I mean, the term substance use disorder is a pet peeve of mine because it takes away people's agency. I'm not an addict. I'm not a person who made bad choices. I have this disorder and I can't help it.
Right.
Right? Okay, you may have an addictive personality. You may have a predisposition towards addiction.
But that shouldn't remove your accountability.
Right. But you still have a choice of whether to act on your urges or not. Right? Every bad journey starts with a horrible first step.
Right. Right. I'm a gambling addict. I'm a sex addict. I'm whatever. I was born this way, therefore I'm predisposed to it. Yeah, I agree with you. That's where the bleeding heart part. That's where I'm not a bleeding heart, because the thing is then we tend to do that, exactly what you're saying, Lyle. We tend to put a diagnosis on everything. Like it's not, I'm unabashed. I'm a Christian. It's not sin. It's a disease. Alcoholism is a disease. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's a choice. Alcoholism's a choice. It becomes a disease when you continue to make the wrong choice, but it's like anything. It starts with a choice and it goes from there, which I think is somewhat what you're saying.
Right. Yeah, I would say so. But it's how do you balance compassion?
Right.
Right. Because there is a balance here
With policy.
right? Well, and tomorrow on the show I've got Hans Urschinger Davis, who's the CEO and president of the Lighthouse Mission.
Oh, perfect.
So 8:00 in the morning, that's what we're going to start with. And I think that as I would say that he is the local expert on homelessness, on rehabilitation, on a lot of these things, because, he's been doing that for 18 years. The mission just celebrated their 100th anniversary, right? These aren't new problems.
That's going to be an interesting interview. I probably won't have this out. I know I won't have it out by the time you do it, but we'll talk about it before we close tonight. I want to make sure how people can hear your show after it's been recorded. So,
yeah.
But let's talk about that. Let's dive back into the homeless a little bit. My understanding is, and we had a conversation earlier about, you did a walkthrough and you even interviewed one of the owners of the encampment across from Fred Meyer, correct?
Yeah. Mark Baumgartner.
And one of his biggest issues was, I can't touch someone's tent because that's their property on my property.
Yeah.
It's almost like his rights are removed as soon as somebody plants their flag on his property.
Yeah, well, and the interesting thing, when you look at that, and I've been having these conversations with, Lieutenant Murphy from the Bellingham Police Department, probably for 2.5 years, right? Or longer. And, it's like Groundhog Day, right? It's like, look, you guys need to do your job and enforce the laws that are on the book. Well, one of those laws is criminal trespass in the second degree. And that's a misdemeanor. Oh, it's only a misdemeanor. It's punishable by up to $1,000 in 90 days, right?
Well, tell us about that day.
Oh, sure. Well, so...
Because it kind of ties into what you're saying.
Right, yeah, the tour. So that tour of the Jack in the Box, Fred Meyer, Bakerview camp.
Yeah.
I was invited by a colleague who's also the listing broker and representing a number of the owners. And he said, well, hey, we're doing a tour. Why don't you come along? I said, great. And because I have a construction and estimating background, I've done cleanup, I've done remediation. I actually had a junk removal company for a while. I'm pretty good at quantifying materials and putting together pricing. And since I've been actively involved in public safety and all of these issues, there were and also in real estate, there are multiple reasons for me to be invited. And so, I showed up half an hour early and was visiting with the city public works crews because they're construction guys, right? I relate. That's your peeps. That's my first language. And so, we're talking, and pretty soon Lieutenant Murphy comes up and she's like, hey, Lyle. I said, hey, Lieutenant, how's it going? Actually, I said Claudia. We've been talking for a long time.
Yeah, you kind of know her on a first name
Right?
basis.
You kind of know everybody, and no disrespect
Sure.
intended, just probably familiarity. And so, she goes, you're fine up here in the parking lot, but you're not going to be able to walk on the property. And I'm like, really? Why is that? Well, there was a list and you weren't on the list. And I said, oh, and yeah, we had to get approval from the property owners, and the city attorney wasn't allowed to go because they didn't want them on the property, and this and that and that and this. And I said, Took a deep breath, and I looked at Lieutenant Murphy and looked her in the eye. I said, you understand how ludicrous and silly you sound right now, right? I said, this is like upside down backwards world. She goes, well, what do you mean? I said, look over there. I said, every body that you see, every tent that you see right over there, right now, you have probable cause to arrest every single person on that property for criminal trespass in the first degree. And do you know what I know? I know that you're not going to. You're going to take Public Works and the other officers through. They're going to shoo everybody away. And then you're going to bring the owner and the mayors through. I go, that's what's going to happen. Well, are you saying we should arrest all those people right now? We'd need 30 officers and warrants and all these things because you have to have warrants for their tents.
Oh, jeez.
And I'm like, no, I'm not actually saying that. I'm saying you should have probably done that months ago. And so
that's when I put in a big kapow.
Big kapow.
I might have to insert that in this video.
Mic
kapow, mic drop.
I mean.
Oh, that's priceless. What did she say? I got the look on her face must have been interesting.
Well, I mean, we've had a lot of conversations.
No, I mean, I respect her. She's trying to do her job.
You know what? Murphy gets, the homeless advocates hate Murphy because of her job.
Right.
A lot of the times,
I don't envy it.
No, she's the messenger. And you know what? People don't understand about the police, in a city.
The toughest job.
Well, not only that. The police chief is not an elected official like a sheriff is. Mm-hmm. A police chief is hired and appointed and works at the pleasure of the mayor. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that people need to understand when they don't think the police are doing their job is that they have to follow the directives of their boss.
So let me get this straight. So you've got this guy who owns this property. It's his property. And if I understand correctly, the city's telling him you got to do something about this problem. But yet he can't go in and do anything about the problem.
Yeah, pretty much. Talk about getting put in a box. And, I've had these conversations with Lieutenant Murphy for 2.5 years. And the city's been really consistent on their policy. What they've said is that if the property owner cleans up the property and fences it and patrols it, then if they have trespassing issues, then the city will come and help. And one of the excuses the city's always used about not enforcing trespasses, well, we can't because it's private property. And I'm like, wait, stop. This is so circular because one of the conditions precedent to it being criminal trespass in the second degree is it has to be on private property.
Wow.
So one of the very things that makes it a crime is what they use as a reason to not enforce it. Well, it's on private property, So then you have to have a trespass authorization, right? You got to go have that document on file. One of the owners on Bakerview's had a trespass authorization for over 10 years. The infamous, notorious Walmart property. Where the poor woman who owns it lives in Taiwan. She bought it in 2019. She's had a trespass authorization since 2019.
But nothing.
Well, no, I mean,
because she doesn't have a fence.
What I've typically seen happen with the city is that, there'll be a tent or two on your property. Somebody will call, the police will come out and they'll talk to them and tell them they need to move along and they'll leave for 10 minutes until the cops are gone, and then they'll come back, or act like they're putting their stuff away.
Of course.
And, they're going to ignore it, especially in this environment when they know nothing's going to happen. And so, if the landowner's persistent, You know, they're going to keep calling you, and eventually the cops will go out there again and, you know, tell them they need to leave. And then it'll be, well, you know, if you don't leave, we're going to have to give you a ticket. Well, you know, the only thing that's inconvenient about a citation from the city is that it's not enough paper to start a fire, right? It's the wrong kind to wipe with, and it's the wrong kind to roll a smoke. So, you know, it's got no utilitarian use. So that's the biggest inconvenience about these tickets, you know. And what they've very quickly discovered is that when they don't go to court, why would you go to court and get consequences when if you just stay out and ignore everything, you'll have a bench warrant, but you'll have no consequences. Nothing is going to happen. You know, I've interdicted some shoplifters. I am definitely no Jimmy Kitchens, but behind over next to our office from time to time, there would be full shopping carts that would get stashed next to the woods. And so, you know, we'd call Target security or whatever and, you know, get involved in helping them recover their stuff. And this one incident, the dude actually came back, right? And he grabbed some stuff out of the cart and took off with it. He's going down the street with this stuff. He came back and took out of the cart while we were waiting for the security to come. And so, you know, I kind of played Mad Crow, and I'm like, follow this guy and go, dude, you can't take that. That's not yours. Put it back. You know, come on. What are you doing? Oh, I just want, you know, and, you know, he was dropping items, and he got down to like just one item or two items. And, you know, so I'm following him across the parking lot. I finally get him to stop. And I'm curious. So I just start asking questions, you know, kind of like you do. You know, so what's your story, man? You know, whatever. And he goes, oh, you're just trying to stall me, man. You're just trying to stall me till the cops come. I go, no, the cops aren't going to come. We all know that. You know that. I know that. Everybody knows that. He goes, yeah, nothing's going to happen. I go, exactly. You and I all know that. You know, nothing's going to happen. And I guarantee this probably isn't your first time. And I'm looking at the guy, and he's dressed decently and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, you haven't been out here that long. What's your story? Well, you know, I was a commercial fisherman, and my girl cheated on me, and I relapsed after 5 years, and I got a couple kids and this and that and whatever. And, you know, but, you know, my girl's going to get me into treatment, and, you know, I'm weaning myself because I'm supposed to go like to treatment tomorrow, whatever. You know, he starts setting me up to be a mark, right? You know, oh, here's this guy who's making progress. I should help him out, you know? And so we're talking, and he's telling me all this stuff, and he opened up quite a bit, and we're kind of worked our way all the way around the park, you know, about a block probably. And all of a sudden he turns to, well, man, I'm trying to wean myself, and, you know, I need like $60 for more blues, you know, and you can spot these guys 12 miles away because they're that pale green color. And, you know, I mean, it's not hard to,
the modern Walking Dead, basically.
yeah, it's not hard to figure out what's going on with them. And so I'm like, dude, have you not been listening to me for the last 10 minutes, man? I'm not going to give you anything. You know, that's not how this game works. I go, look, if you're scheduled to get picked up to go to treatment the day after tomorrow, how about you just throw away whatever you got? I'll get you down to I'll get you down to the mission or something, and you can start to wean yourself or detox yourself. Oh, no. Then he started cussing me out, and he left. Right. So, you know, it was the whole hustle, you know, and people are street smart, right? I mean, you know, they're not out there looking for, I mean, they're out there looking for a mark. They're not looking for help a lot of the time. You know, I mean, it's a way of life. It's not.
Well, I've seen interviews. I mean, there was one not too long ago where they interviewed in these people. When you offer them programs with accountability, they don't want that. They just want the program. They don't want the accountability, which ties into
permanent supportive housing.
Right.
No barrier housing. You know, it's like, look,
let them eat cake.
We're going to let you perpetuate. You can live exactly your camp lifestyle. You can go out. You can still associate the same. You're free to come and go. As a matter of fact, 22 North, to bounce back to that for a second, they actually have leases. They have tenant leases there. So they have tenant rights, right? So they're in a free place, and I guess there's some percentage of their income that goes towards their rent, but it's extremely nominal. You know, I don't.
That's assuming they're working, or is that one of the
well? I
stipulations?
mean, a lot of people are getting some form of SSI or disability or, you know, something, right?
It'll be interesting to hear what the requirements are in this next interview I'm going to do with this person that was involved with that.
Yeah, she'll be much more familiar with that.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
So that ought to be really interesting. But it's
But to back, to this, again, to accountability, I saw a blurb with, I'm not sure is it Hans, the guy who runs the mission?
president and CEO of the mission, Hans Ursula Davis.
Where was the interview I saw? It was just a clip where he said, look, the problem is a lot of these guys, they come in, but they don't want to adhere to our rules and regulations.
Well, no.
And that's the problem. So with that said,
I mean, people do this. They go, why would anyone want to be homeless? Why would they want to live a transient lifestyle? Why would you do that? And, the thing of it is most of us, I'm going to refer to people in society as normies, right? Most normies have never been free. From the time you're a little kid, you're on a schedule, 5 years old, you start school. Yeah. Right. So you're in this regimen of responsibility, and you have to be places on time, and you have to do all these things, right. And then you go from there to university or college or vocational school, or maybe straight into the workforce or whatever.
Yeah.
And, you get some time on the weekends, but most people don't truly understand what it means to be free. People who are living a transient lifestyle understand freedom. They understand party hardy till you don't party till you drop, probably literally, and then you wake up when you wake up and you start over the next day, right? Think about this. If you're out flying a sign and you're getting $50 an hour or $75 an hour to fly a sign, or fake play an accordion, or whatever it is that you're doing,
yeah,
that money's worth 30% more because it's not taxed.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting because there are some homeless advocates that you'll hear saying, well, if you see somebody stealing food, or if you just need to look the other way, they portray theft as survival theft. And what most people don't realize is that it's actually organized retail theft.
Absolutely.
Right. So people are rolling into town with a pickup truck, and a bag of blues, and they're trading blues for merchandise, right? And then it goes to these big warehouses in Seattle and other places, and those places have eBay stores and Amazon stores. They're huge fencing operations that are literally multi-million-dollar operations.
Well, it's interesting you said it. When I was interviewing Jeffrey Holmes, who's been through every one of these camps from front to back, he says there's levels. At the front, you've got the drug dealers and the sex traffickers and the retail theft, and you've got piles of clothes. At least the Walmart camp last winter, that's what it was. And, you bring your clothes, you get your money or your drugs. Mm-hmm. That's the exchange. And as you get deeper in, he says the interesting thing is there is those people who just want to be left alone. Mm-hmm. They do exist. Mm-hmm. They don't want anything to do with the drugs, mm-hmm. sex trafficking, any of that. They just want mm-hmm. to be, like you said, free. Mm-hmm. And those are the people, okay, good on you. Great. The problem is the people who are doing the illegal stuff, who we end up paying for. Why is it that I have to be a responsible person, or I'm going to go to jail? I guarantee you, I do the same stuff those homeless people do. I'll probably end up in jail.
Oh, totally you will. 100%.
Because I should know better, and I'm at a different level.
Well, we're talking about the property owners, and this kind of fits with what you're talking about right now. What's super ironic is that you've got 100 or 150 people on your property who are trespassing, who are littering, many of whom have multiple warrants for theft and
various things.
Other various things. They've trashed your property. They've built illegal structures. They've encroached on wetlands. They've done all these things. Do you know what happens? The property owner gets an enforcement letter from the city that says your camp on your property that you didn't build, that all these people built, that we didn't enforce trespass on. Now it's your responsibility to clean this up, or we are going to fine you. And you could go to jail if you don't respond and do what we are asking you to do at your expense. What kind of upside down, backwards world are we in when that's the case. That's the way this is going to work, is that, look, if you don't do what we say, we're going to fine you and we're going to put you in jail. But the people who actually have been breaking the law that you've been asking us to deal with, who we've done nothing with, and we've let this grow to become a nuisance.
Well, and that brings it about full circle to my purview, which is leadership. The same leadership has been allowing this. The same leadership that says they're going to fix it is the same leadership that has been allowing it for a long time now. And
this goes back to the Kelly. Yeah. This goes clear back to the Kelly Linville.
Decades.
It goes back. Yeah, it goes clear back to the Kelly Linville days.
Oh no, it's decades. And but it's gotten. Here's the question, folks. Has it gotten better? I think all of us can say clearly it hasn't. So we have to look at these common denominators and we have to start doing some house cleaning. And I'm not going to use politically charged terms. I'm just going to say Lyle here has a public safety matters. He's a facts guy. He's a data-driven guy. He's, unlike me, he prefers not to get into the weeds of the political side of things. And that's fine. I respect that because I agree. We need the data. The data speaks for itself. And here's what the data says. Something that's been continually happening needs to change. If you can't figure that out, then you're part of the problem because it's pretty obvious.
Well, and the advocacy community will always tell you that the reason that Housing First hasn't worked, and the reason that all of these outreach programs haven't worked, and the reason none of these things have worked is because we haven't spent enough money yet.
It's always,
always. And one of the things with OPCO and 22 North, they had 8 deaths in a relatively short period of time. They've had some really serious problems. And what's interesting is listening to all of the meetings when they're coming to the county council and they're, begging not to be defunded and all those things. Not once did I hear an employee or a director or an officer or anybody from that organization say, we feel really bad. 8 people who we were responsible for, who we were providing supportive warehousing for, died. They lost their life. One girl was shot in the head. There were several overdoses.
Wow.
You don't hear that. What you hear is that, you can't defund us. That would be horrible. That would unhouse other people. And it would be, really what it is, no, you can't defund us. We'd lose all of our funding and we'd lose these employees and, our empire would crumble a little bit, but if you say that, you're not going to get sympathy. But if you say, well, all these people, what about these other people? Right. It's just not fair. It's not right. You can't do that. That being said, also, we need to enter into publicly funded housing projects extremely mindfully because they literally are a Trojan house.
Yeah.
Right. It's really easy to get into these programs, but 22 North illustrates really well what happens is that, it can go horrendously bad, to the point that you have a higher chance of dying in a supportive housing facility than you do in an illegal encampment in Bellingham or on the sidewalks, right? You literally are statistically more likely to die. And they've made some surface improvements. Maybe their overdose rates and death rates and things are improving, but we have to be very, very mindful because what that demonstrates is that once we start to fund a housing program or a housing facility, if we hold them accountable, it's going to be, oh no, you can't do that. You're unhousing somebody. We have to set up our parameters, our milestones, our objectives, our measurements, our goals, all those things on the front side. We've got to go, look, here's the program. You're entering into this on these conditions. Understand that this may be permanent and supportive, but it's not permanently funded.
But that's that again, to me, that's that bleeding heart mentality, that do no harm mentality. We want to rehabilitate, not incarcerate mentality. And the problem is,
Yeah, but they don't
that
want
ship sailed.
That's interesting when you say that. That's in terms of diversion and jail alternatives. But when it comes to permanent supportive housing, they don't want to rehabilitate.
Yeah. Interesting.
Right. I mean, that's a really interesting
That's the
contrast.
Paradox. Yeah.
Right. Totally a paradox. You know, I mean, looking at our Involuntary Treatment Act and our Involuntary Commitment Acts and those kinds of things, you know, it's super interesting. If you're on the streets of Bellingham and you listen to Scanner, so you hear this stuff all the time. I do
all the time.
You know, you'll hear, oh, there's an overdose on Magnolia, and they go down there, and
Narcan's been applied.
Somebody get 63% of the time in Whatcom County, Narcan is at least one dose of Narcan is administered before EMS arrives. But what you'll hear is that they're up and walking, they're denying service, and they're leaving.
Yep.
You know, denying
I
service.
hear it all the time.
Denying service is probably the nice way of saying that they're being cussed out and verbally assaulted as this person is.
You just messed up my high.
Narcan makes them instantly dope sick, right?
Yep.
And so instantly, it's like instant withdrawal. And so at that point, they have the right to refuse service, refuse treatment, make life and death decisions for themselves.
And the law enforcement and medical have an obligation to allow that.
Fast forward 4 hours, 1 p.m. This is not based on an actual incident, but this is based on actual principles. Person X who OD'd was Narcan. You know, I call that live to die another day. Someone right. You know, it's like James Bond. It's like live to die another day. Yeah. They get really ticked at somebody. They pick up a pipe and they assault somebody seriously with a pipe. Okay. So they get an assault 2 charge. Actually, that'd probably be an assault 1 charge. So, you know, they've got a class B or a class A felony on their hand, depending on the seriousness of the assault. They're going to take that same person to jail and they're going to do a competency evaluation. And there's a really good chance, if they've got drug-induced schizophrenia, if they've been using P2P meth or whatever, that they're going to be found incompetent to stand trial. So at 9 a.m., you can overdose and refuse treatment and refuse services and refuse help. And at 1 p.m., the same person can be found incompetent to stand trial. How's that for a paradox? Because that is more often the reality of our situation than anyone's willing to admit.
And I feel sorry. I really have empathy for these first responders who are trying so hard to walk this line, to walk this tightrope, which is really a thread of trying to serve their community, do what's right within the law, and yet not be the object of disdain.
Well, and it gets worse. You know, I've kind of danced around this and hit on this a little bit. You know, city police work at the pleasure of the mayor. So the chief of police is not elected. The chief of police is hired and fired. And so they follow directives of their boss, who is the mayor. You know, and I don't know of any specific directives with our current mayor and police chief, but I do of past mayors and past police chiefs where the mayor's issued a directive. We're not going to enforce no sit, no lie, no stand. You know, you're to leave those people alone.
Wow.
Right. You know, and those have been the kind of policies. So imagine if you're a law enforcement professional, you know what the law is. You understand that that's not allowed.
But we'll enforce wearing a mask.
But
I say that with some sarcasm. The point I'm making is, let's pick and choose our bleeding heart policies, which ones we're going to enforce and which ones we're not. I mean, again, it goes back for me. Who's at the top making these decisions? Who's the leadership that's been continually and cohesively making these poor decisions? That light bulb has to go on for people, and something has to change.
Yeah, I think people have to get involved.
No, I agree.
And honestly, I really don't care what label a political leader
Sure.
wears. I really don't. I think there are good leaders and bad leaders that wear all different kinds of labels and identify all different kinds of ways.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more interested in policy and pragmatism and honesty, and so much of our policies, really and I know I've said this already tonight, and I'll probably say it 12 more times. The measuring criteria for policy decisions is if it sounds good and it makes my heart feel better, then it must be good. If it sounds bad or mean and it makes my heart feel sad, it must be bad. Right? My friend Steve Avila, who owns
Love Steve.
Fitness Evolution.
I interviewed Steve. Great interview.
So he probably talked about using the sharp instrument to pierce somebody's lung, to reinflate somebody's lung.
Oh, gotcha.
Right? So, but if you just go stab somebody with that same instrument, right? Well, that sounds like a mean thing, but if you're stabbing them, to actually reinflate a collapsed lung, you're using the same technique and the same tool, but it's for higher good. And, and there are a lot of therapies, there are a lot of treatments, there are a lot of methodologies and things that we use that may sound mean. There are substance use disorder professionals who I've spoken with, and they're like, look, these drugs rewire your brain. People literally become like 3-year-old brain, and you have to have boundaries, you have to have consequences, because those are the only things that are effective that people understand.
Well, again, it's like surgery. You have to, cut the issue out. If you've got cancer, that's going to hurt to cut out the cancer, but the healing, the end result is going to be life-saving. And that's kind of where we're at with the decisions that our leaders need to make. Is, well, we don't want to hurt anybody. Okay, but are you really hurting? The end result is healing, but we have to be willing to do what you consider the hard thing first. And that's the thing is, I think, when I worked at FastCap, Paul Akers, toured Japan. He's in the Toyota principle, the Kaizen, which is continual improvement. And one of the things he taught me is, Mark, you always do the hard thing first. Then you pick up in the back with all the stuff that's easy. Because once you get the hard thing first out of the way, then the other stuff's just trivial. And that's the thing that I think our leaders are afraid to do. They're afraid to do the hard thing first because, somebody's going to complain it hurts somebody on the front end. But in the back end is healing. It's a medicinal metaphor. You have to have surgery to cut out the cancer. Otherwise, it's going to metastasize and the whole body's going to die. And that's where we're at in Bellingham and Whatcom County is there's cancer and it needs to be cut out. And the question is how and who's willing to do that?
I think that we have to appeal to people's better nature. I think that when we jump to labeling people and assuming that we know what makes them tick based on how they identify, I think we get out in the weeds and a lot gets lost. We lose common ground. I mean, you know what? I don't know a grandparent in the world or a parent in the world really who doesn't care about their kid. I think, even people in the throes of addiction and dysfunction on some level still care for their children. They want them to be safe. They don't want them to be harmed,
but the question is what is harm? There's grandparents that think that because little Johnny played with the doll once, that he's actually probably a girl.
Now you're getting into, you're moving away from public safety and you're getting in the weeds.
Well, no, but I'm talking about what is right and wrong, what is harm. You're saying that you're making a blanket statement saying that
I'm talking about.
I believe that I don't know anyone that doesn't. I do.
Well,
I know people that have.
I'm talking about from a public safety basis. I think people want their kids to be able to go to the park.
Okay, you're saying the general.
I'm talking
normal
about,
population.
I'm just talking about in general. I'm not going to. There are exceptions to every rule.
You're leaving out the exceptions.
I mean, look, Mark. We can all run around and we can find exceptions all day, and you know, you interact on social media. There are always people that find some obtuse, you know, narrative or deflection or whatever, or you know, they'll take a good conversation, you know, in a totally stupid direction. Excuse me for saying that, but but I mean, you know, it's not about that, and I think too much we polarize and we focus on our differences. You know, we don't look at the things. You know, it doesn't matter how many parks we have in our county and in our cities if it's not safe to use them. It doesn't matter how nice our schools are if we have to keep our kids locked down all the time. You know, and they can't go out on the playground, or, you know, if they go out, they're going to be exposed to lewd behavior or dangerous behaviors, or they're going to be people, you know, there's going to be secondhand fentanyl smoke or whatever, right? You know, it doesn't matter how much pretty art we put in downtown Bellingham or how many cool events we have. If you know, you got to clean the crap off your shoes when you walk around. You know, or, you know, if you have, you know, got people blocking sidewalks, you're getting assaulted, or, you know, it was interesting last week. I had a couple reports of business owners in downtown Bellingham who were trying to move people along in front of their stores. And I'm told that's what they're expected to do, because if they don't clean up the mess in front of their store, the city's taking a policy similar to the encampment property owners, and they'll fine the building owners.
Yeah.
Right. So they're starting to employ some of those same things. I had a couple reports last week where, you know, a building owner was trying to move some people along, and an officer came by and said, "Hey, you need to be careful, or you could be charged with harassment for assertively removing somebody who's camped out in front of your store making a mess." So we create this really interesting paradox where we tell people they have to do something, but then we don't empower them to do that, and we don't support them in that activity.
But I think, and I'll leave this as this is be my kind of closing, and then I want to give you the last word with a question. I think what you're saying, we agree. What everything you're saying is true. What I'm saying is there's a certain segment of society, large segment, that ideology lends itself to being blind to everything you're saying. Oh, they see I don't like this. They see that there's a problem, but their ideology does not allow them to do the necessary surgery that needs to happen. And that's because the reason I come to that conclusion is pattern recognition. It's clearly prevalent, and it's been that way now for several decades. And so that's how I can come to that conclusion, that we've got to try and get to people's hearts and minds and change the ideology.
And labels will
well,
not
no, I'm not
do
saying
that.
labels. I agree with you.
No, but what I'm saying is when even referring to leadership, because ultimately it comes down to partisanship when you start talking about leaders in Washington State. You know, what you really need to do, and I've seen political wannabes do that to the point that, you know, if you're demonizing people who you need to vote for you, you know, or demonizing the party they identify with, or those kinds of things, you put them in a situation where it's really, even if they want to vote for you, it becomes very difficult.
You think
for them.
they dig their heels in?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's human nature on some level. Nobody likes to be told they're stupid. You know, nobody wants to be told that they're the cause of all that ails the community. You know, but yet, you know, I think that, if we look at that common ground and those common concerns.
Well, with that said, what if Lyle Sorenson had a magic wand or was given the power to say, this is what we're going to do, is briefly as you can, or as condensed as you can, what, yeah, good luck with that. What would you do if you could say, Lyle, we're going to leave it up to you to make a policy or to make a plan. How would we clean up the homeless? And how would we deal with the drug and crime situation?
It comes down to root causes. Everybody likes to talk about root causes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they like to talk about income inequality, and they like to talk about, mass cultural economic changes and those kinds of things. But, if we look at the system that we have and we look at things that can be implemented, we've moved away from basic principles of things that work, right? Law and order, right? The rule of law.
Why do you think that is, though?
Public order, because it's mean, Mark. It's mean. We're more sophisticated and civilized than that now. We're much more enlightened.
I don't disagree.
Well, we had those policies for 200 years and it didn't eliminate crime and things. And so there are people who have the mindset that if you give people everything that they need and you meet all of their basic needs, that crime will go away and nobody will steal. And, that's a great utopian dream. The truth is human nature says that there will always be somebody who didn't get their share that they deserved, and they're going to want somebody else's. It's human nature. I just don't, it doesn't matter. And there's never true equality in outcome.
No.
The reason the American system has worked is because we've had equality of opportunity. The outcome's a crapshoot.
Yeah.
But, people come here from all over the world because of the opportunity that's here. And in fact, one of the Bakerview property owners came here from Vietnam, right, with pretty much nothing. And he's built himself a very successful life by working very hard, by investing, by doing all the things. He's used the opportunity that's here, that's available for everybody. It's just that I think a lot of times people who were born here forget about that opportunity or take it for granted or don't see it.
Oh, yeah, of course.
We're such an affluent society.
Right.
I mean, we live in probably the most affluent time in history, right? So we have time to worry about things and spend money on things that in a less affluent time you wouldn't do, right?
Well, and I would say, correct me if you disagree, but in a less affluent time, I don't think the homeless would be such an issue because nobody wanted to be homeless in less affluent times because of the very reason you just described, that it's so affluent that it's easy to be homeless now because you can get whatever you want whenever you want.
It's funny you say that because it's not entirely true.
How so?
There's a book by a gentleman named Nels Anderson that was written in 1921 and 22. It was published in 1923 by the University of Chicago. It was actually his master's thesis. What's super interesting about that is our lighthouse mission also happens to be, was founded like in 1922 or 23. And what he talks about in that book, there are passages there, and I was going to look up a couple and share them, but we probably don't have time for that today. But there are passages in that book that was written 100 years ago that could have been written 2 weeks ago.
Really?
100%.
Really?
What's interesting about that book, and I would recommend it to anyone.
And what's the name of the book
It's
again?
called The Hobos.
It's by who?
Nels Anderson. And you can actually find it online, like National Archive kind of thing, and it's been all scanned and stuff. And you can actually read it for free. I did. Or you can buy a copy if you're that guy. You can buy a copy for $30 or $40. But what's interesting about that book is he actually lived the lifestyle. So it wasn't written by some sociologist who was studying it. Nels Anderson's family growing up lived kind of a bit of a transient lifestyle. His dad was kind of an itinerant brick mason, right? So they moved around a lot. They, lived they tried farming on an Indian reservation. They did lots of different things. And then Nels himself ended up living a transient lifestyle in his younger years. At some point, he ended up in Utah with a Mormon family for 4 years, and they really taught him the importance of education, and that kind of launched him on his academic path. And so, he ended up back at the University of Chicago for his master's degree, which was, like the foremost school of sociology in 1923, right? That's where all the who's and the who's what's and the whatnots. But what's interesting about that, at that time, the city of Chicago was about 3 million people. There was a district in Chicago called Hobohemia. Hobohemia was a district that had about 30,000 people in it. And it's where the hobos, tramps, and bums hung out in Chicago. So it's where the flop houses were. It's where the missions were. It's where the hotels by the week or month were. All of those things were in that district. So, what makes this book a really fascinating read is that he's telling this story from lived experience, because he lived the transient lifestyle. And it's coming from a time when people didn't couch everything in political correctness. And, they just, he just wrote it how it was. Right?
Interesting.
And it's amazing how similar things were. Extremely similar.
Well, history repeats itself.
Well, but that's been an ongoing, the transient lifestyle. And I think that's things that people don't grasp, and probably less so now than in other times, is that hobos were migratory workers. There were hobo unions in the 20s, right, to organize these migrant workers, and they harvested crops, they built roads, they worked in mines, on railroads, they did road building, pipeline building, those kinds of things, big construction projects, or a city burned down, a whole bunch of hobo masons and move into town. They were predominantly single men. And then there was another subset called tramps, and we hear all these terms in modern jargon, and we're like, but they actually had very specific meanings. And a tramp was somebody who kind of lived a hobo lifestyle, but they were more about the adventure and less about the work. So they would work as little as possible, just enough to subsist. And then
it's a little more closer to what we have now.
Well, we'll get even closer. And so, they had a transient lifestyle that they enjoyed. The next category were the bums. And there were actually different categories of bums. What's interesting is there is a woman on social media who is formerly homeless, and she will often talk about home bums. I'm like, what in the world is home bums? Well, as a result of reading this book, I found out that that's actually a correct descriptive term. And those are the guys, the home bums were the guys who never went anywhere. So like our illegal encampments, the terminology for those was jungle. They were called jungles. The song Big Rock Candy Mountain, right? It was in Oh Brother Where Art Thou. That was written in 1928. And it was a cleaned up version of an old hobo anthem that was originally actually a warning, because a lot of the hobos had, because there weren't a lot of women around, had homosexual tendencies, and they like to, drag off little boys into the life, or young men into teenagers, or young adult males into the lifestyle. And so it was kind of a warning song. So, you can actually, if you Google, you can actually find the original lyrics, the ones that were on Oh Brother Where Art Thou and stuff. When I was growing up, that was a kid's song, right? Big Rock Candy Mountain. Well, there's some lines in there though that perfectly describe Bellingham.
Really?
Oh, yeah, we've become hobo heaven. One of the lines in there says, it's talking about, streams of whiskey and lakes of gravy and all this kind of stuff, but a place where the bulldogs all have rubber teeth and the cops have wooden legs, right? Where the jails are made of tin and I can walk in and right back out again. You start listening and you look at the things that are going on. It's like nothing's changed.
Wow. That's interesting.
Right? So
that's interesting.
We're kind of Big Rock Candy Bellingham, right? One of my hashtags that I use on the page now is Bellingham. And people don't realize the the transient nature of things, when you get these big illegal encampments, you know, there was a death that happened in the Walmart camp, probably, I don't know, a year and a half ago, maybe now. Time goes fast. I'm not sure. But for a long time, I had used a hashtag called Deadliest Camp. And a lot of people didn't understand what that was about. But if you know, people follow Deadliest Catch, the Harris brothers from the Cornelia Marie, the younger brother, Jake, had a drug addiction problem. And it was on the show. It was obvious and stuff. He was at the camp with his girlfriend, who was
in the Bellingham Walmart camp.
In the Bellingham Walmart camp, with a gal who was married to somebody else who had 7 kids. She was actually, her backstory was she was a social worker, and she was helping people with placement and services and all those kinds of things. And you know, they connected, and you know, blah blah blah. And then the story goes that he told her, well, you know, you need to use with me, and then we can get clean together.
Wow. Said the devil.
So long story short, she overdosed in the Walmart camp. Mom of 7, her and Jake had 1 kid together, which her husband, who had the other 6 children, took that baby also when they lost custody. But they had been in Marysville, you know, and you know, you can run, you know, a lot of the time when we see some of these names and some of the things that happen, we run backgrounds on people, right? So we'll put it in, and we can see their criminal history. We can see last known addresses. We can see a chain of history of places where they've lived and whatnot. You know, it's a lot of times people say, well, how do you know so many people are from out of the area? And I'm like, well, you know, law enforcement will tell you, right? You know, the point in time count, you only have to be here 6 months to be considered local. So when the advocacy people tell you, well, most of these people are local, it's like, well, yeah, but the official metric is, have you been here 6 months? Or did you have
if you didn't go to high school here or middle school here, you're not local.
Well, I mean, that's not necessarily, depending on what point in time you moved here. And
now, that's my definition.
Well, that's fine. But I know a lot of people who've been here 20 years or more, and I would say at this point they're local, right? You know, I mean,
that would probably include middle school.
No, it actually, well, it depends on the age.
Yeah, 20 years, yeah.
It depends on the people that you know. But
you become local, but 6 months, come on.
No, the 6 month thing, you know, it really is. It's really an inaccurate. It's a really inaccurate metric.
It's a generous way to put it.
It's really misleading.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you have to really pay attention to these kinds of things. You know, if you look at the homeless resolution that this county council has, some of the things, and you know, and there are things by going to council meetings, you really learn a lot if you pay attention. You know, and in this, they listed all these statistics for homelessness in our local school districts. And one of the ones that got my attention, because I went to Cal Pi High, was they said that Nooksack, 17% of the kids enrolled at that school were homeless. And I'm like, yeah, no, there's just no way. That, you know, that got my attention. So me being
the next question would be, what defines homeless? Because these people have a home. It's just not the traditional home that we all think about. It might be a tent.
No, and the McKinney-Vento definition isn't even that. So there are a lot of things related to migratory workers, farm workers, those kinds of things. So you get into the county, you've got people who work in the dairy industry or work in the berry industry.
Those were the hobos, right?
Well, back in the day,
yeah.
Right. But I mean, and McKinney-Vento is really, really generous. So you can, you know, if your family moved here 3 years ago to take a milking job, you could be considered homeless, right? You could be considered to qualify for that. If you live in a building that's been converted from some other use, you can qualify. If I mean, put it this way, 95% 5% of the things that qualify you for that classification, most people would not see as homeless. Right.
That would be me.
Right. No, I mean, it just wouldn't. Right. And so, I challenged a couple of our council members who were sponsoring that resolution openly at open session. And I said, I don't know if you're ignorant or if you're being disingenuous. Neither of those things is really a good position to be in your position. But, things like that are why it's important. And it's why it's important to understand, right? Because the general population, most people, if you're not exposed to that stuff, you just hear these numbers coming from our leaders and you go, oh my gosh, that's horrible. Nobody wants to see kids living homeless, right? So, it's always about the children. And, when policy decisions are made by emotion, what makes my heart feel happy or what makes my heart feel sad or what sounds good or bad or whatever, then those things are very powerful. Resolutions like that, by the way, people should understand, don't have the effect of law, but what they do is they lay the foundation for future law. And so when you go and hang around, what you'll find out is when they get around to actually doing something that has some force to it and actually has some teeth, it'll be based on 2 or 3 of these resolutions. So the recitals, the whereases, will refer to all these resolutions that they've passed over the last 2 or 3 years and then those all have, be it resolved, right? After all the recitals, then they get to the punchline and what they want to do. And so they'll cite 2 or 3 resolutions and they'll use that as the basis to create a new law.
So
new ordinance.
I think I don't want to close for you, but I would say in closing, your message, one of the biggest messages would be, people got to start showing up to these county council meetings and becoming educated on, just exactly what they are losing or gaining, and being seen and heard, you feel really makes a difference.
It does make a difference. I'll be the first to admit there's times it really feels like you're banging your head on the wall and you really wonder, over the course, I don't even know how many 3-minute public comments I've made. A lot of them are, most of them are public safety related. And a lot of them are about the lack of incarceral capacity. It's like, when are we going to make misdemeanors illegal again, right? Now we're to the point of when are we going to make felonies illegal again? We literally don't have the capacity. There's a little bit of talk maybe now about using the South Correctional Entity in Des Moines down by Federal Way for some interim capacity. The city's been sending like 15 people a year there, like a little over 1 a month. I've heard some rumblings. Maybe they're going to increase that capacity. What I can tell you about that, though, is governments will never use anything to the extent it needs to be used if it's expensive or inconvenient. And so, really what we need here, and, talking to Sheriff Elfo in the past and talking to others, is we need 650 or 700 beds on an interim basis to be able to stabilize things. And, when I first started this journey several years ago, I was like, 250 beds added on to the 325 or so, 400 that we have now would probably, be okay. But then what happens is that there are economies of scale that happen operationally. So right now, one of the things that really hurts our budget and really hurts our correctional staffing capabilities and things is that we're running 2 separate facilities. If we had those underneath one roof, we wouldn't have those redundancies that you have. So that would allow us to do more.
You said you had kind of an idea for an interim jail situation or somewhat of a solution.
Well, there's a company in Texas called ModCore. And we actually had some executives from ModCore present to the Business and Commerce Advisory Committee probably 2 years ago. And frankly, we could have 650 beds something like that, in 12 months,
Is this what is this like track like pop-up walls? I mean, what could you give me an example?
they come in on skids. They're modular. They're built 30, they're 30-year life. They're built to full and carceral specifications.
Interesting.
I mean, they're,
That's brilliant.
Oh yeah. Well, and honestly, they're probably 30% less than.
I was gonna say, what's the cost for
They're probably 30% less than conventional construction.
And didn't we have some property out off Lummi?
No, we've got 40 acres off of LeBounty Road that was purchased for the new jail. It's where, when they eventually get around to building something, that's where the jail will go. I think it's Sunset Avenue or whatever it is. It kind of runs into it. It'd be the property that's just north of Rabanco, on the west side of LeBounty Road, almost to Slater.
So could this temporary housing be used there?
You totally could. Part of the reluctance with doing anything interim is the county likes to blame their malfeasance. They like to say it's because, they did the work, they operated the work center and stuff. And that's why they burned up all that $60 or $64 million, which just isn't factually correct. Any assertions I'm making on here, I've actually made in county council meetings, and I've made on live radio as well, and never been challenged or corrected by any officials.
Right.
So I would say that,
you're pretty safe to say it's pretty accurate.
The allegations or the characterizations that I'm making are accurate.
Right on point. Yeah. Well, Lyle, I think I appreciate the fact that you are a data guy that likes to dig into this, and we can find you, or essence of you, Public Safety Matters on Facebook page, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And also on local radio here on KGMI with Radio Real Estate. That's every week.
That's every week at 10 o'clock. Rick Todd and I co-host that. If people are super listeners on Cascade Radio Group, they'll recognize Rick from football and basketball.
Oh yeah,
games.
I know
so
Rick.
He does a lot of play-by-play broadcast. Yep. He's been a local pastor in the community. Yep. Yeah, he's also a realtor, and he's guy's been around. He's a lot of fun. We just have a good time. Saturday morning live, I'm always the first weekend of the month at 8 a.m. Anytime I get a chance to fill in for somebody, since I got to be there at 10 anyway.
So you have, of course, it'll be after this podcast gets edited, but you have a Sunday morning live.
Saturday morning live in the morning.
Tomorrow, yeah. And that is, you're interviewing
Hans Urschinger Davis from the Lighthouse Mission. So, and he sent me some of his talking points. You're not going to want to miss it. I mean, I would say Hans has been in that position for 18 years. I would say that he is the leading subject matter expert on all things related to homelessness in Whatcom County.
So for the people that aren't going to be able to, that are going to miss it live, where can they go to hear it afterwards?
All of the shows are available to listen to or download on kgmi.com in the podcast section. So if you go on there, you'll see podcasts, and then you can access them there. And there's a tool so you can listen to them that way, or you can download them.
Yeah, I'll post a link in this podcast too. That way people can check that out, because that directly ties into what we're talking about. So
yeah, I mean, that's going to be a fabulous show. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm blessed with some great guests. I mean, we've interviewed people in active recovery, all those kinds of things. And, I think it's important to share people's success stories. I've had Jenny Burton on the show.
Jenny Burton's another one I'd like to get. She is a wealth of knowledge about incarceration and just how it affected her life.
Lived experience to the nth degree, but yet, she's also got the academic credentials that go with that. And, her programs are in, Washington state prisons now. So she's got some Department of Corrections contracts and things, and having some good results. In fact, she contacted me the other day and we're going to be talking. she's got someone coming out of prison and coming out of the program that'll probably be in Whatcom County. So I'm kind of excited about that, actually.
Excellent.
Right? Well, yeah, because you know what? What happens is that when people take initiative and they truly want to make their life better, right? And they're taking big steps, you know what? People respond and respect that. And my earlier comments about, I wonder what would happen if there was an encampment where people self-regulated, right? So that they were just neighbors, right? And the advocacy community always says, well, they're just our vulnerable neighbors. It's like, yeah, they're bad neighbors though, right?
Bad neighbors. Bringing it around full circle. That's a good point. The whole,
the encampments are bad neighbors. Not everybody.
Not everybody in there,
and
right.
not everybody in there is probably a bad person.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I should probably share this story. I was in Fred Meyer's one night buying gift cards for clients. Right, so we do closing gifts and things, and I was buying some gift cards at the self-checkout. And there was a gentleman with a backpack who was right across from me, and he had a little short-handled shovel stuck between his backpack and his back, and the blade of the shovel was facing me, and it was a Virgin shovel and had the brand new sticker on it and stuff, right? And then I became curious. I'm like, well, what's he gonna do with the shovel? And he had an EBT card, and he was buying some prune juice to offset his opioids side effects, and he had
the constipation,
two or three other things there, and and that's kind of the newer MO. Rather than running out with a shopping cart, you load up your backpack, you buy 2 or 3 or 4 inexpensive items, and you go right out through the checkout, right? So then you look like a legit customer, and it makes it harder for loss prevention and others to detect you, but predictable is preventable.
Unless Jimmy Kitchens is there.
Yeah, Jimmy sneaks up on me there all the time.
Well, stop stealing stuff, Lyle.
Yeah, no, he just does it and giggles. He just has the best. After I peel myself off the ceiling. Yeah. Jimmy's awesome, by the way. But anyway, and so this fellow was doing his thing, and I'm like, I don't think he's gonna scan that shovel. So I just walked over really nice, and I said, hey, buddy, I think you forgot to scan your shovel. Oh, no. I got that at another store. I brought it in with me. I said, oh, man, that's a nice shovel. Where'd you find it? He says, oh, Harbor Freight. And I'm like, oh, Harbor Freight. Okay. Well, Google's your friend. And so it was a Corona shovel. So I put in Corona shovels. Guess Bellingham. Guess who carries Corona shovels? Fred Meyer and Ace Hardware, but not Harbor Freight. So I turned back.
Quite the little bit of detective work there on the spot.
So I turned back around to the guy and I hold up my phone and I go, gosh, I wonder how you got that at Harbor Freight. They don't carry Corona. I go, but Fred Meyer and Ace do. I go, you should probably put the shovel down, put the shovel back, or scan it and pay for it. One of those two things would probably be a good idea. Well, he decided that was, and I said, look, we've already determined that you're a liar. So you can double down and be a thief and a liar, or you can just be a liar. It's kind of your thing. He decided that'd be a good time to make his exit. So dude's heading the door, and I'm kind of doing the Black Crow thing. I'm following this guy. I go, dude, you either need to pay for that or put it back. You're a thief and a liar. You're a thief and so singing a chorus about that loud all the way to the door. Yeah, it's like, dude, you're a thief and a liar. You're a thief and a liar. And and so we get to the door, and he takes the shovel out and he holds it like this, like he's and like he's gonna hit me with the shovel. And I go, really? I go, you want
an assault charge now?
No, at that point it would become armed robbery, actually.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, and I'm like, well, so you want to go to prison now too? And I go, I'm not going to make any guarantees on how this is going to end for you before that point, but that's up to you. And so he decided that the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, and he walked over and unlocked the forks on his bicycle and was getting on his bicycle, and he's calling me a douchebag, right? He's going, dude, you're a douche. You're a douchebag. I go, you might be right, but at least I'm not a thief and a liar. Right? And so that's going on. And there's these 2 homeless hookers standing there. You can't make this stuff up. There's these 2 homeless. ladies of the night. It's probably not nice to call them homeless hookers, but it has a certain ring to it. Anyway, and they were sweet. They were so nice. The one girl holds her fist out like that to give me knuckle bumps, and she goes, "Thank you." She's like, "We hate guys like that. They give us a bad name. We pay for everything we get, and we work hard for what we get."
Right.
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 You know, and her friend was there and said the same thing. I mean, they were like flipping awesome. Right. And it's like, well, thanks for being great citizens. You know, I mean, you're doing what you got to do to survive, but you know, at least you're not stealing from the store.
And you didn't even have to lift a hand. Ladies and gentlemen, right there is what you call mental jujitsu. Lyle got into that guy's head. Even that guy got into his head enough psychologically that the guy had a conscience all of a sudden.
No, he didn't. He rode off with his shovel.
Oh, he did?
Oh, yeah. He rode off with his shovel.
Oh, I thought he returned
No,
it.
he wasn't returning anything. No, he was just threatening to hit me with it. And
Oh, okay.
he proceeded
Okay.
just to tell me what he
Well,
thought
still
about.
some good mental
Well,
jujitsu,
no, but
though.
the story's not over. I wish it was. So I turn around to go back to the store to pay for my several $100s worth of gift cards, and I'm about to step in the door, and one of the PICs steps in front of me and says, "Wait, you can't come back in my store." I said, "Really? Why is that?" He says, "Well, you're creating a disruption in my store, and you can't do that." So we're back to the same thing. It's, you know, we're not punishing the criminal. We're not punishing the person who's
Well, that's what I
stealing
said
from the
earlier.
store,
Right.
right? And, you know, and it's the same thing with the encampments. It's the same thing with the business owners. It's the same thing all the way through. And so I'm looking at this guy, I go, what kind of alternate reality am I in right now? Right. You know, and, you know, he's threatening to have me trespassed and stuff. And I'm just like, seriously, you know, I go, well, you could be hurt. And if you got hurt, you'd see this. I go, no, I wouldn't see the store. I go, I've got medical insurance. And besides that, you didn't ask me to do this. But, you know, the way my parents raised me,
Right.
you know, that's not okay. And I think 90% of the citizens of Bellingham feel the same way, whether they do anything or not, right? So, you know, I talked my way back into the store. And so then we're standing inside the inner doors, and the gal who was the PI, there was no manager there. It was just, you know, number 3s and number 4s.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're talking and stuff, and, you know, shared with them that, you know, I've been working on things, you know, like this for several years. And then I host a couple radio shows. Just thought they should be informed that it would make a really good story on my show. If anything happened, it would make a fabulous,
Absolutely.
it'd make a fabulous segment. You know, and then they kind of, you know, the girl kind of wanted to share and stuff, and, you know, and I don't want to get anybody in trouble,
But I mean, she must have been frustrated.
oh yeah, you know, and you know, it's just they get paid, right? But you know that if you're losing $1 million, they average a theft every 7 minutes from the time they open until the time they close.
Are you serious?
That's unofficial, but that's what I've heard. Yeah. You know, and
we pay for it in the end.
well, yeah, because, you know, what I learned in that exchange is that Kroger has a loss rating system for their stores, and that store has a severe rating.
Wow.
Well, I do enough spreadsheets to understand how that works. You put in the loss rating up in the corner, and all your markup formulas change, right?
Wow.
So your algorithm that prices all your products for the entire store changes. Of course, we all pay for it, and they as much as admitted that, you know, at that time, it's like, yeah, you know, and isn't it ironic? You go in there, you know, when you see a case or you see something cabled or whatever, that means that more than 10% of that class of items was going out the door unpaid,
Wow.
right? You know, and what happened to our society and our city? We're locking up stores, not thieves, you know, and people actually will say things like that on social media and other places. Well, they need better security, and they need to lock stuff up so it can't be stolen.
Always
It's like,
somebody else's fault.
yeah, but I mean, seriously, you know, if we could put the founding fathers in a time machine and bring them,
Oh, yeah.
you know, we're coming up on 250 years here. If we could bring them to modern America, what would they think? What would they say? I mean, you know, when they quit laughing at adult men picking up steaming piles of dog poop behind their dog,
Right.
right? You know, after they quit laughing at that,
Right.
or being amazed and
in their Lululemon shorts.
Right. You know, I mean, it'd be like, say what? Right. but then to see things like that where there's open lawlessness, right? And you don't lock up the thieves, you don't deal with the problem, you don't stop the problem. You put the burden on society and on business owners and say, well, you know, you're getting stolen from because you don't have good enough security. You're not locking your
Just
stuff
like
up.
the owner.
You're not fencing your
Right.
property. You know, it's
Yeah.
like telling the girl, and I've been warned not to use this example, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Yeah, go for it. You
Yeah.
have my permission.
Oh, I don't
On my show anyway.
I don't usually ask for permission. I think I've actually said this I've said this a lot of times. I've said it in council meetings. Kaylee Galloway's eyes got really big when I use this example. But you know, it's like telling the woman in a short skirt who's assaulted, listen, clean up your camp, put on a chastity belt and hire a bodyguard, and next time you get assaulted, we'll enforce the law. Because that's what they're saying. They're telling property owners, put up a fence, lock up your merchandise, hire guards, and then the next time we'll do our job.
Wow.
That
is a good analogy.
That's what we're telling people.
Yep.
You know, and what message are we sending? You know, like if you have warrants, right? And people who have warrants know, you know, they probably know how many of those tickets they've burned up. You know, or they've got them in a little cigarette wrapper somewhere in their tent or something. You know, you get pulled over or you get busted and you get stopped, right? And they let you go. You know that you have a felony warrant with an FTA, right? You're driving your car with no license plate or no tabs. And you get pulled over at 3 a.m. because that's what they look for at 3 a.m. And they call in to check with the jail to see if you can be booked on your warrants. And the jail says no. Right. So then what do? They say, well, gosh, they say, Mark, look, here's the deal, man. We can't book you tonight. Here's a ticket. Here's a new court date. Make sure you respond. That's it.
No, I hear.
The message we're sending is it doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. Nothing is going to happen.
That's right. And these poor officers, I can hear it in their voices as I listen to it on the scanner when they get back from, you know, Central Command that basically says, yeah, jail won't take them. They're like, okay.
Yeah. Right.
They're frustrated. Because
Well,
what are they doing? They're trying to do their job, which is to arrest people for illegal activity and book them. But they can't because we have a problem with the jail that goes back a decade or two.
It goes back a quarter of a century. Here's how bad it is. I mean, I have seen them firsthand interact with people. They know the person's name.
Oh, yeah.
They know them
They're
by
on a
name and
first-name
face.
basis. Yep.
They can name their last 3 girlfriends. In fact, they're asking them, oh, are you still with so-and-so? Oh, no. Oh, you're back with so-and-so? Right? They've interacted with these people so much. You know, half the time when they're pulling over these cars, I think they recognize the car because they probably pulled it over 6 times. Right? I think they probably have a pretty good idea this person probably has a warrant, you know, or else, you know, they're out at 3. They're probably up to no good, you know, and here they go again. I mean...
No. It's the definition of insanity, as we all know, is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And here we are. So I think, you know, back full circle to your point, on a local basis, you know, if you really want change, you have to get involved. And going to a city council meeting or county council meeting isn't that big of a commitment. It's a couple hours out of your evening, twice a month, you know, to show up and let them know that, hey, this is not okay. Otherwise, guys, you know, it's like Stockholm syndrome. You're just identifying with your captors and you're not willing to do anything about it. And so, you know, I think that's Lyle's ultimate message here is, you know, folks, you got to be aware, you got to get involved. And 2 hours, 4 hours a month.
You know, if you really want to make a difference and you really want to make an impact, bring 19 of your best friends.
Right.
Because you know what? For every 20 people who get 3 minutes, that's an hour.
I'm going to get a bus.
I mean,
start picking people up.
Seriously. You know what? 40 people, that's 2 hours. So, the council members who all vote together, who seem like they don't listen, although I'm starting to see maybe some signs with at least one of them asking the executive some hard questions about when are we going to have capacity. We need some interim capacity. I mean, literally, I've been asking these questions week after week, and when I stand up there, I'm like, look, you guys probably already know what I'm going to talk about. I try to give you some new information every time, but you know what I'm going to say. And I said, if you're tired of me coming here and talking about this, then do something.
Yep.
Please.
Yep.
You guys pass resolutions, you pass emergencies, you pass funding for everything except public safety.
Wow.
Everything except public safety. So you telegraph by what you're willing to do with your money. You show us loud and clear what's important to you, and it's not public safety.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, there it is right there. I mean, what more can you say? Got to get involved, got to be aware. Take a couple hours a month and make your way down to a county council meeting. Lyle, Public Safety Matters on Facebook, Radio Real Estate every weekend, right? Saturday morning live. First one tomorrow.
First weekend at 8 a.m.
Right. Great interview coming up with the guy who runs
Hans
Lighthouse
Urshinger
Mission.
Davis.
Yeah, say it again.
Hans Urshinger Davis.
Right.
President and CEO.
I can't wait. I'm going to set my alarm to hear that. Lyle, we have tons more to talk about, but for now, I think that's
You were yawning.
Well, no, it's just because we've been talking for 3 hours, so which we always do. Your wealth of information.
3 hours.
Wealth of information, and man, I appreciate you coming on. I'll have you again soon because there's lots of stuff that always moves and shakes and evolves. It's constantly fluid, so there's always going to be new stuff to talk about. So, Lyle, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
All right, you guys, that's all for the Urban Outcast tonight. We'll see you guys again soon. I'm your host, Mark Urban. Until next time, take care.